I held the death notification and informed him of the morning. Ethan, Mom had a car accident and is gone. However, Ethan tightly embraced the panicked Vivian in his arms and roared at me, "Your mom is dead, so be it, no matter how big the issue, don't bother me while I'm taking care of Vivian." I stared at him intently and told him word by word, "Ethan, open your damn eyes and see clearly, the one who was hit and killed is your mom." He tore my mother-in-law's death certificate to shreds. Right in front of me, he embraced the pitiable Vivian into his arms. Then, like throwing away garbage, he tossed a card at me. "Hold a decent funeral for your mom, and don't bother me again." "Fine, this funeral, I will make it grand and spectacular, ensuring he remembers it for the rest of his life." "Are you a family member of Grace?" When the hospital called, I was stewing lotus root and pork rib soup for my mother-in-law, her favorite. "I am her daughter-in-law." "I'm sorry, the patient succumbed to severe injuries from the car accident despite resuscitation efforts. The at-fault driver is named Vivian and has been detained." Vivian, my husband Ethan's personal assistant. Holding the phone, the soup ladle clattered to the ground. Trembling, I dialed Ethan's number. It rang for a long time before he impatiently answered. "What now?" "I'm busy." I heard Vivian's weak voice with a sobbing tone on the other end. "Brother Ethan, I'm so scared." My voice was as dry as sandpaper. "Ethan, Mom had an accident, she's gone." There was a second of silence on the other end, followed by Ethan's irritable roar. "Your mom is dead, so be it, no matter how big the issue, don't bother me while I'm taking care of Vivian." The phone was slammed down harshly. I stood there like a statue devoid of its soul. Outside the morgue, the pale lights made one uneasy. Ethan finally arrived, still tightly holding the perpetrator, Vivian, in his arms. It seemed he had just bailed her out from the traffic police, likely using considerable connections. Vivian was wearing Ethan's oversized suit jacket, her small face pale. Upon seeing me, tears streamed down like broken pearls. She threw herself into Ethan's arms, crying breathlessly. "Brother Ethan, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hit Auntie. I really didn't know she would suddenly rush out." Ethan gently patted her back, his voice carrying a soothing gentleness. "All right, Vivian, don't cry, I know it wasn't intentional. The incident has happened, it's not your fault." His gaze didn't even glance my way. I stared at him intently and told him word by word, "Ethan, open your damn eyes and see clearly, the one who was hit and killed is your mom." Ethan reacted as if he had heard the biggest joke, his look toward me was filled with disgust and contempt. "Sophia, are you insane? Vivian already told me she accidentally hit your mom, she's nearly scared to death, and you're here stimulating her with such vicious lies?" I took out that thin sheet of paper from my bag, it was my mother-in-law's death notification. "Grace, your mother, look clearly at the name on it." Without even looking, he snatched it and tore it to shreds. The paper scraps fell like snowflakes at my feet. "Sophia, my mom has always been so good to you, to retaliate against Vivian, how can you be so vicious as to fabricate such lies?" Slap. A crisp, resounding slap landed harshly on my face. "My mom is fine at home, dare you curse her one more time?" He pointed at my nose, his eyes filled with disgust that nearly engulfed me. Vivian timely poked her head out from his arms and tugged at his sleeve. With her pure and innocent big eyes looking at me, her voice was low and aggrieved. "Brother Ethan, don't blame Sister Sophia. She might just be too heartbroken, after all, it's her mother." "What a considerate white lotus." I covered my face and laughed. The stinging pain on my face was far less than the coldness in my heart. When I returned home and pushed open the door, a strange perfume scent hit me. Sickeningly sweet, it was Vivian's scent. In the living room, Ethan was sitting on the sofa, with Vivian leaning against him like a little bird, peeling an apple for him. She was wearing my house slippers. Those fluffy bunny slippers were specially bought for me by my mother-in-law last winter. Her posture made it seem as if she were the mistress of this house. Upon seeing me, Vivian immediately stood up, and the fruit knife clanged to the ground. "Sister Sophia, you're back. Like a startled rabbit, she shrank back into Ethan's arms. Ethan frowned at me, his tone full of reproach. You still know to come back? How's the matter with your mom being handled? I ignored him and walked straight up to them. I took out my phone and played the last voice message my mother-in-law sent me before her death. Sophia, I saw Ethan and that Vivian at the hotel, come quickly. The entire living room fell deathly silent. Ethan's face changed instantly, not out of guilt, but out of rage from having his lie exposed. He abruptly stood up, snatched my phone, and smashed it hard against the polished marble floor. Bang! The phone screen shattered instantly. Sophia, enough. Vivian and I went to the hotel for business discussions. He pointed at my nose, trembling with anger. Using such low-class synthesized voice to frame Vivian and me, you really disgust me. What kind of person is my mom? Would she go to such a place? To slander us, you even disregard my mom's reputation. Vivian's tears came again, perfectly hanging at the corner of her eyes, her acting skills comparable to an award-winning actress. She tugged at Ethan's arm, crying, Sister Sophia, how can you think that of brother Ethan and me? We were just discussing work, really. Auntie, did Auntie misunderstand something? She really knows how to talk. One word misunderstanding turned my mother-in-law's death into her own fault. Looking at the mess on the floor and my husband's cold, unfamiliar face, my heart died completely in that moment. He is both stupid and doesn't love me. So, he would rather believe a lie full of holes than believe me, his wife. Suddenly, I didn't want to argue anymore, because it was pointless. I took a deep breath, my tone calm as if talking about someone else's matter. Fine, I was wrong. I was insane, I was talking nonsense. I'll handle my mom's funeral arrangements. My compliance gradually extinguished the anger in his eyes, replaced by a trace of satisfaction. He probably thought I had finally recognized reality and wouldn't trouble him anymore. That's right. He embraced Vivian and sat back on the sofa. Recognizing reality early is good for everyone. I squatted down and silently pried out the small SIM card from the phone fragments. The sharp fragments cut my fingertip, and a bead of blood seeped out. The cloud should have automatically backed up, right? Ethan, this is the knife you handed me yourself. I won't disappoint you. Seeing me accept my fate, the satisfaction in Ethan's eyes nearly overflowed. He pulled out a black card from his wallet and threw it onto the coffee table in front of me like discarding trash. Clack, a crisp and piercing sound. There's 500,000 in here, the password is Vivian's birthday. Hold a decent funeral for your mom, don't let her complain down there that our Gu family mistreated her. Although Ethan's words were as cold as knives, I inexplicably found it amusing. Using the birthday of the killer mistress as the password for the bank card to hold a funeral for his own mother, this man is truly stupid in a way that moves one to filial piety. Vivian's acting addiction flared up again, she weakly tugged at Ethan's sleeve. Brother Ethan, this isn't good, how can you use my birthday, after all, it was me. She hesitated, her eyes showing no guilt, only triumph. Or, keep the funeral simple, Brother Ethan, you still need to take care of me during this time, I'm afraid Sister Sophia can't handle it alone. Ethan pulled her even tighter, his eyes full of pity. You're just too kind. He turned to me, his gaze becoming harsh again. Did you hear? 500,000, buy a better cemetery for your mom, don't be ungrateful. This is the Gu family's utmost benevolence, consider it my compensation on behalf of Vivian to your mom. I bent down and picked up the card. Looking at him, I forced an extremely calm smile. Fine. Thank you, Ethan. This Ethan made his habitual condescending expression stiffen for a moment, his brows furrowing tightly. I didn't look at him again and turned to leave. By the way, sign Vivian's letter of understanding later, after all, it wasn't intentional. You can't let Vivian bear any stain because of your deceased mom, it wouldn't be good for her future development. Got it. I replied coldly, without turning back to look at that adulterous pair. The moment the door closed, I heard Vivian's coquettish voice. Brother Ethan, did I say something wrong? Sister Sophia seems angry. Holding this blood-stained funeral fee, I dialed the most expensive funeral home in the city. Hello, I want to book the largest mourning hall. For the urn, I want her most expensive golden namu wood. Wreaths? Imported white chrysanthemums from the Netherlands, the more, the better, I want to fill the entire hall. My mother-in-law was frugal all her life, in the end, using her son and his mistress's dirty money to hold the most extravagant funeral. This way, she can see what kind of good son she raised. I notified my mother-in-law's relatives one by one. On the other end, third aunt cried uncontrollably and asked how Ethan was. I pinched my thigh hard to force a crying tone. Third aunt, Ethan he couldn't bear the blow, he locked himself in the room, not eating or drinking. No matter how I persuade him, it's useless, I'm so afraid something will happen to him. The relatives believed it and even comforted me in return, telling me to be more understanding, saying Ethan was just too filial. Filial? I almost laughed out loud. My calmness made Ethan feel a trace of unease. He called, his tone unable to hide the probing. Sophia, you haven't caused any trouble, have you? I was pointing at the mourning hall design drawing. Upon hearing this, I chuckled lightly. Ethan, rest assured, I'm busy picking wreaths for your mother. Oh no, my mother, no time. He was choked for a moment but soon numbed by Vivian's gentle embrace, assuming I was overly heartbroken and numb. Fine, before a lion pounces on a rabbit, it is always the quietest. At night, I guarded my mother-in-law's coffin alone. In the cold coffin lay the person who loved me the most in this world. I took out my backup phone, plugged in the earphones, and set that voice message on loop. Sophia, I saw Ethan and that Vivian at the hotel, come quickly. With each loop, the fire in my heart extinguished a bit more, and the ice formed grew thicker by an inch. Mom, watch carefully. The ticket for this play, I bought with your son's money. And it's the most expensive VIP seat. I'll invite him to witness it with his own eyes. To witness whose mom he forced to death for his lover. On the day of the funeral, I arrived earliest. The mourning hall was personally arranged by me, solemn and dignified, with mournful music playing softly. The white chrysanthemums air-freighted from the Netherlands filled the entire hall, their fragrance so it was choking. In the center, my mother-in-law's portrait was covered by a large white cloth. The elegiac couplet was written in bold calligraphy with 8 large characters, deep mourning for our beloved mother. These words were written by a calligrapher I hired, each worth a fortune, paid for with the card Ethan gave me. The relatives from my mother-in-law's side arrived one after another. Third aunt held my hand, her eyes red. Sophia, where is Ethan? Why hasn't he come yet? This child, his mom loved him the most, how can he not come to send her off on her last journey? A distant cousin chimed in. Yes, Sophia, you need to persuade him more, don't let him be stubborn. I lowered my eyes, my voice hoarse. He will come. The relatives exchanged glances, saying no more, but the discussions and speculations in their eyes didn't stop. Ethan appeared at the mourning hall entrance, embracing Vivian. Today, Vivian had applied a pitiable, sickly makeup, wearing a plain black long dress that made her look frail and delicate. She held a bunch of white chrysanthemums in her hands, performing the full act. What a flourishing white lotus! As soon as she entered, without looking at me, she headed straight toward the portrait covered by the white cloth. Then, in front of all the relatives, she knelt down with a thud. Tears came on cue, her acting comparable to an award-winning actress. Auntie, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean it. Rest assured, in the future, I will take good care of brother Ethan and sister Sophia on your behalf. I hope your spirit in heaven can rest in peace. While crying, she secretly glanced at me from the corner of her eye. A few soft-hearted female relatives had already started pulling out handkerchiefs. Who is this girl? She seems quite conscientious. Yes, unlike Sophia, so cold. Ethan watched Vivian's performance with satisfaction, helped her up from the ground, and embraced her. Like completing a task, he bowed toward the portrait's direction. Then he turned to me impatiently. Sophia, everyone is here, can we start? Ended early, Vivian's body hasn't recovered yet, she needs to go back and rest. He thought this was mourning my mother. He was even too lazy to take an extra look or ask one more question. I nodded, picked up the microphone on the MC's stand. The entire morning hall instantly quieted down. My voice wasn't loud, but it clearly reached everyone's ears. Thank you all for coming amidst your busy schedules to attend my mother-in-law's. I deliberately paused, glancing from the corner of my eye as Ethan and Vivian both looked at me. Ms. Grace's memorial service. The words mother-in-law struck Ethan's face like a bolt of thunder. His face instantly stiffened. And Vivian in his arms was already scared pale. She knew better than anyone that Ethan's mother was named Grace. I gave them no time to react. Under everyone's astonished gazes, I turned, walked onto the stage, and fiercely yanked off the white cloth covering the portrait. In the photo, my mother-in-law was wearing her favorite cheongsam, smiling with grace and elegance. Those kind eyes now seemed to silently gaze at her good son. I coldly looked at Ethan below the stage, his face ashen, and brought the microphone to my mouth, word by word. Ethan, do you see clearly now? The one killed by your sweetheart, whom you wouldn't even glance at in the end, whose mom is it exactly? Ethan's pupils contracted to a pinpoint. He stared fixedly at the smiling portrait, as if nailed in place. His throat emitted wheezing sounds, like a dying beast. Mom. This utterance was as light as a murmur in a dream. The next second, his legs weakened, and he knelt straight down to the ground. His kneecaps collided with the cold tiles, producing a thud-muffled sound. Vivian in his arms finally let out an ear-piercing scream. No. Impossible. How could it be Auntie? How? She finally understood. She had killed the wrong person and performed the wrong act. She wanted to push Ethan away but found her legs as soft as mud. In the morning hall, the relatives from my mother-in-law's side finally recovered from the shock, and the place exploded instantly. Third aunt was the first to rush up, slapping the back of Ethan's head. Beast. You heartless beast. Your mom died, and you didn't even know. You even brought this vixen here to act. A distant aunt who usually loved taking small advantages had just praised Vivian for being sensible. Now, her face was ashen, pointing at Vivian's nose and screaming. Vixen. So it was you who killed Big Sister. I knew it was too coincidental. You jinx. Ethan turned a deaf ear, just kneeling there, staring blankly at the portrait like a fool. I raised the microphone, my voice wasn't loud, but it suppressed all the noise. Everyone, please be quiet. Looking down at Ethan's bloodless face, I smiled. Ethan, didn't you want to know why I cursed your mom? Because she really died. Died under the wheels of your precious Vivian. I took the death notification to the hospital to find you, you slapped me and called me vicious. Right in front of me, you tore it to shreds. Do you remember? I played the last voice message my mother-in-law sent me before her death. You smashed my phone, saying I used low-class synthesized voice to frame you. Do you remember? You tossed me a black card, using $500,000 to buy your biological mother's funeral. The password was still your lover's birthday, June 16th. Ethan, do you remember all this? Each of my words was like an awl, piercing harshly into his heart. His whole body trembled violently. I no longer looked at him, took out my backup phone, and connected it to the morning hall sound system. My mother-in-law's familiar and panicked voice clearly echoed in everyone's ears. Sophia, I saw Ethan and that Vivian at the hotel, come quickly. Immediately after, there was the sharp breaking sound and the dull collision sound. It pierced the dead silence of the morning hall. Vivian screamed like crazy. No. It was a misunderstanding. We were discussing work. It was a hotel client. Auntie misunderstood. She really misunderstood. Misunderstanding? I sneered and opened another file on my phone. I had already had a projector installed in the morning hall. Now, it came in handy. I pressed the play button. The last photo my mother-in-law took in urgency from her phone was clearly projected onto the white wall next to the portrait. In the hotel's underground parking lot, the lighting was dim. Ethan was pressing Vivian firmly against the car door, kissing passionately. The image was high definition and uncensored. Discussing work? I brought the microphone to my mouth, my voice cold. Is this how you discuss work? The light from the big screen palely illuminated Vivian's desperate face. It also illuminated Ethan's face, uglier than a dead person's. The entire morning hall was deathly silent. Only Ethan's heavy, bovine breathing and Vivian's uncontrollable, desperate sobs remained. All disguises, all lies, were torn clean by me in front of my mother-in-law's portrait. Mom, did you see? What expression does your good son have now? Ethan finally moved. As if all his bones were suddenly removed, he recovered from the shock and crawled toward me on all fours. Sophia, I was wrong. He grabbed my pant leg, his voice hoarse like a broken gong. I really didn't know. I really didn't know it was Mom. I was deceived by her. I abruptly stepped back, as if touched by something dirty. His hand weakly grasped in midair and fell empty. Looking down at him, deceived you? Ethan, she used you as a tool, and you enjoyed it. Now saying you were deceived, don't you find it ridiculous? He just kept shaking his head, tears and snot covering his face. I was too lazy to look at his pathetic appearance anymore and took out the already prepared document from my bag. The cold papers were harshly thrown at his face. The white papers with black words scattered around him like snowflakes. Ethan, sign it. He stiffly lowered his head and saw those big words, divorce agreement. His expression was as if he saw not paper, but his own epitaph. He didn't move, but the relatives did. Third aunt was the first to rush up, grabbing the hair of the limp Vivian on the ground. Little slut, still want to run? If I don't break your legs today, I'm not May. The cousin who had just praised Vivian as gentle and virtuous now had explosive combat power, spitting a thick phlegm precisely in front of Vivian. Pa. What a thing. Still want to marry into our Goo family? I think you want to go straight into our Goo family's ancestral grave. The words were crude but reasonable. I ignored the commotion over there, took out my phone, and in front of everyone, dialed 911. I put it on speaker. Hello, 911 Emergency Center. Looking at Vivian's pale face, word by word, clearly. Hello, I want to report a crime. South City Funeral Home, Yeoman Hall. There's a hit-and-run perpetrator here. I suspect she is involved in intentional homicide. The words intentional homicide struck Vivian's crown like heavenly thunder. She shuddered, her eyes rolled back, and she completely fainted. Truly useless. I hung up the phone and looked back at Ethan. Ethan, do you know? After Mom discovered your affair, the first thing she did was call me to come over. Even in death, she thought of protecting me, her daughter-in-law. And you? For this killer, you hit me, cursed me, used money to humiliate your own mom's funeral. Tell me, do you deserve to be her son? He finally collapsed, emitting wheezing mournful cries like a desperate beast. Third aunt picked up a pen and an agreement, roughly stuffing it into his hand. Sign. Sign it now. Our Goo family has no unfilial son like you, worse than pigs and dogs. In the distance, the siren sounds approached from far, becoming increasingly piercing. That was the last straw that broke him. Ethan, with trembling hands, signed his name next to mine. The handwriting was twisted like a dying worm. I bent down, picked up the agreement, and carefully blew off the non-existent dust. Then, I didn't look at him again. I turned to face my mother-in-law's portrait. All the noise, cries, and curses behind me seemed to fade away. Facing the gently smiling mother-in-law in the photo, I deeply bowed. Mom, rest in peace. Your vengeance, I have avenged. The siren sounds approached and finally stopped at the morning hall entrance. The previously noisy hall instantly became so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Several uniformed police officers entered, their sharp gazes scanning the scene. Only third aunt was persistently trying to leave some love marks on Ethan's face with her nails. Beast. Today, I must scratch your face. An officer stepped forward, politely but firmly pulling her away. This family member, please calm down. Vivian was lifted from the ground by two female officers. She was still acting, her legs as soft as freshly cooked noodles, her whole body hanging on the officers. I'm dizzy. I need to go to the hospital. I don't know anything. The leading officer glanced at her, expressionless. You'll go to the hospital. First, come back to the station with us and explain how you drove and killed someone. I was also asked to give a statement. I placed the backup phone, the USB drive with photo backups from my mother-in-law's phone, and the black card Ethan tossed me, one by one on the table. The table was cold iron. This is the hush money he gave. Oh no, I said it wrong. Looking at the young officer taking notes opposite me, I tugged at the corner of my mouth. It's my mother-in-law's funeral fee. The card was given by him, the password is his lover's birthday, June 1st, Children's Day. Perhaps in his heart, Vivian is a child who never grows up and needs to be pampered. The young officer's hand holding the pen paused, looking up at me. His eyes held sympathy, shock, but more of a professional numbness of, today I've really seen it all. Coming out of the interrogation room, I saw Ethan in the corridor. He sat on the bench like a puppet devoid of soul. His hair was messy, his expensive suit wrinkled like pickled vegetables. His eyes stared blankly at the ground, muttering repeatedly. I approached and heard clearly. It was me who killed my mom, it was me. How did I believe her words? Mom. Now you know it's you? What were you doing earlier? This repentance comes later than the police car. After giving my statement, it was already the next morning. Walking out of the police station door, the glaring sunlight made me squint instinctively. I felt an unprecedented fatigue, but also a sense of calm as the dust settled. Not long after, the investigating officer called me. He said Vivian confessed everything. In the face of irrefutable evidence, her cheap psychological defense collapsed at a touch. She admitted she intentionally drove into my mother-in-law. Because my mother-in-law discovered their affair and said she would expose her at the company, ruining her reputation. In a panic, she developed murderous intent. The officer paused on the phone, seemingly organizing his words. Miss Sophia, she said, she always thought the one hit was your mother. She said killing your mom could teach you a lesson and make Ethan pity her more, killing two birds with one stone. I couldn't hold back and really laughed out loud. With this IQ, how did she become the general manager's assistant? By her face? The officer dry coughed twice and continued. The nature of the case has officially changed from traffic accident to suspected intentional homicide. The prosecutor's office will soon file charges. I said thank you and hung up. The phone had just been put down when it rang again. This time, it was my lawyer. His voice was steady and powerful, like a shot of adrenaline. Miss Sophia, we can start preparing for the divorce procedures and property division. Mr. Ethan has marital fault and caused you severe mental harm, we have an absolute advantage. Looking at the sunrise fully leaping over the horizon, I softly hummed. Ethan was released. He pressed the doorbell like a death knell. One after another, urgent and irritable. Wearing slippers, I leisurely strolled to the door and peered through the peephole. What a picture of belated repentance. He was kneeling on the ground. Not seen for several days, he had changed beyond recognition. His hair greasy and stuck to his forehead, stubble unkempt, expensive suit jacket gone, white shirt wrinkled like pickled vegetables, collar with suspicious yellow stains. Sophia. Open the door. Open it. While shouting, he raised his hand and slapped himself harshly. Slap. Slap. Crisp and resounding, it sounded painful. I was wrong. I'm not human. I'm a beast. It was all that slut Vivian who deceived me. I was blinded by lard. Let me in, I'll kowtow to you. Please forgive me. He cried with snot and tears covering his face, utterly wretched. Unfortunately, not a single tear was for his deceased mom. I didn't open the door. Through the cold security door, I calmly spoke. Your repentance should be at your mom's grave. Not to me. The person outside quieted for a moment. Then came more frantic wailing and pounding on the door. Bang! 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 Sophia! You can't do this to me. Open the door. The neighbor Aunt Lee quietly opened a crack in her door, looked, and bang closed it again. I turned and walked into the living room, isolating the noise behind me. The lawyer's call came timely, his voice steady. There's one thing that might surprise you. The lawyer paused, seeming to choose his words. Ms. Grace, that is, your mother-in-law, had made a notarized will before her death. My heart jumped fiercely. A street-facing shop under her name and $3,200,000 in deposits, all designated to be inherited by you alone. My breathing stopped. The will says she has no daughter. In this life, she only recognizes you as her caring daughter. The voice on the phone continued. But I couldn't hear a word. Tears unexpectedly smashed onto the floor, spreading a small dark stain. Mom. You are the silliest fool in the world. How could you give all the good to me, an outsider? Yet raised an ungrateful wolf who personally sent you to the crematorium. Not long after hanging up, a strange number called. I casually answered. It was third aunt. Her voice was sharp enough to pierce my eardrum. Sophia. You vixen. Jinx. What bewitching soup did you feed my big sister? Why should the Gu family's property go to an outsider like you? Have you been hoping for her death long ago? So you can seize the family property. I tell you, that shop was left by my parents to my big sister. It has nothing to do with you. Spit it out now. Otherwise I directly hung up and blocked. No point talking to a mad dog. Indeed, not from the same family, don't enter the same door. Soon, Ethan's messages flooded in like a tide. Sophia, I just came from the lawyer. Mom, how could she do this to me? That's my mom. I'm her biological son. Sophia, I was wrong, really wrong, can we start over? The money and shop are all yours, I don't want anything, I just want you. Have you forgotten when we first got together? You loved eating wontons from that place in the south of the city, we still. I looked expressionlessly at those ridiculous texts. Still wanting to hold me hostage with the past? He probably forgot that the past was shattered by his own hands. I decisively dragged his number into the blacklist. All ways he could contact me, fully blocked. The world finally quieted. I leaned on the sofa, looking at the bright sunlight outside the window. The more he suffered, the more he collapsed, the calmer my heart became. Vivian's intentional homicide case went to trial. I specially chose a black long dress. Solemn, appropriate. Very suitable for attending a funeral. Watching Vivian being escorted in by 2 bailiffs. She wore handcuffs, with shackles on her feet. Walking produced clatter, clatter sounds. Not seen for a few days, she was emaciated like a ghost. The gray prison uniform hung loosely on her body. She raised her head and saw me. In those hollow eyes, a venomous snake-like fire ignited instantly. She wanted to say something, her lips moved, but she was held down by the bailiff. In the gallery, a middle-aged woman exploded. It was Vivian's mom. Her makeup was thick, but cried off. Like a painted face in opera. It's you. You vixen. Jinx. My daughter is so kind, she wouldn't even kill a chicken. How could she kill? It's you. You venomous woman framed her. You're just jealous that my daughter is young and beautiful, able to get Ethan's love. While cursing, she tried to rush over but was firmly blocked by the bailiff. I dug my ear. Really noisy. Soon, Ethan was called to the stand. Those few steps to the witness stand seemed like walking a century. His back was hunched. As if overnight, he aged 20 years. His spine seemed extracted. Witness, please state the content of your call with the defendant Vivian on the day of the incident. The judge's voice had no warmth. Ethan's lips trembled like leaves in the wind. She said, she drove and hit someone. She said the one hit was Sophia's mom. I believed it. I told her not to be afraid, I have her. I clearly saw that on the relatives' seats behind him. Third aunt's face turned green. Why did you believe her? Ethan's head hung lower, his voice with a heavy nasal tone. Because, she said Sophia's mom always looked down on me, thinking I wasn't worthy of Sophia. She said, as long as Sophia's mom is gone, Sophia would have no maternal family to back her. Then, she could only rely on me wholeheartedly. She also said, this is an opportunity given by God. Huh. God. If God had eyes, the first to be struck down should be you adulterous pair. He was like a marionette, recounting piece by piece how he tore the death certificate, how he slapped me, how he used that blood-stained black card to humiliate me. With each sentence, Vivian's face paled more. And the whispers from Ethan's relatives' seats grew louder. At the end, he completely broke down. A grown man, covering his face on the witness stand, wailing loudly. I'm not human, my mom was thus by me, personally sent to the crematorium by me. The crying was really unpleasant. I lowered my head to look at my phone, pondering what to eat later. The hot and sour noodles from the south of the city seemed good. The gavel fell. Defendant Vivian, guilty of intentional homicide, sentenced to life imprisonment. Upon hearing the verdict, Vivian collapsed to the ground as if her bones were removed. Her mouth emitted ha-ha strange calls, like a dying wild dog. Her mom went crazy again, cursing me, crying Your Honor, injustice, and was forcibly dragged out of the courtroom. I stood up and slowly walked out. Exiting the court doors, the sunlight was glaring. This bizarre and absurd case exploded that day. Passing a newsstand, the front-page headlines were more eye-catching than the last. Shocking scandal in wealthy family, infatuated CEO inverts black and white for mistress, personally sends biological mother to crematorium. Quite literally written. Ethan, completely socially dead. The company issued a statement at lightning speed, firing him. Former business partners who fawned over him couldn't be reached by phone. Even the relatives he valued most looked at him like a pile of garbage. Looking at the news push on my phone, my heart was calm like a stagnant pool. When an avalanche happens, no snowflake is innocent. At the Civil Affairs Bureau entrance, Ethan and I each held a dark green booklet. Freshly issued. He looked more than 10 years older, the dark circles under his eyes almost dropping to his chin. His once meticulously groomed hair was now greasy enough to fry a dish. He gripped the divorce certificate tightly, veins bulging on the back of his hand. He finally spoke, his voice like a broken bellows. If I had believed you then, would everything be different? Looking at him, I suddenly found it a bit amusing. Ethan, do you know? I married far away to your place, my mom isn't by my side. It was your mom who made me feel a trace of warmth in this strange city. She would stew my favorite soup, remember the snacks I mentioned casually, and secretly stuff money to me, telling me not to shortchange myself. When you slapped me the first time, I thought, we're done. But you shouldn't have, for an outsider, sacrificed mom's life. Do you think we still have a chance? I said each word slowly and clearly, as if stating a fact unrelated to me. The color on his face faded inch by inch, leaving only ashen gray. I turned and left, leaving him there. The lawyer's call came soon. The procedures for the shop mom left me were completed. Prime location, the rent alone is enough for me to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I returned to that place once called home and packed my things. Anything belonging to Ethan, I was too lazy to touch. Halfway through packing, a strange number called. Sophia. You harbinger of death. Do you have any conscience? It was Ethan's second aunt. You rolled away all our Gu family's money. And seized my big sister's shop too. What have you done to Ethan? What more do you want? I put the phone on speaker, set it aside, and continued folding my clothes. Oh, so you want the shop back? She choked, shrieking, that's my big sister's. It should have been Ethan's. I said leisurely. Fine. Go to my mother-in-law's grave and ask her if she's willing to let Ethan inherit her estate. The other end instantly fell silent. Then came furious curses and the busy tone of hanging up. Really relieving. Finally, I picked up my mother-in-law's relic box. Inside were some small items she loved in life, organized by me. An old notebook slid out from the corner of the box. I opened it. It was Mom's diary. The handwriting was elegant. Today Sophia bought me a new massager, saying my waist is bad. This child is much more caring than that bastard Ethan. Ethan is with that Vivian again. I caught them at the hotel. How can he treat Sophia like this? I need to think of a way, can't let Sophia be wronged. I confronted Ethan, he told me not to meddle. My heart feels like it's being cut by a knife. Sophia is such a good girl, how can I watch her being ruined by a pig? Tears unexpectedly smashed onto the page, spreading a small ink stain. Holding the diary, I sat in the empty living room, crying like a child. Mom, I'm not wronged anymore. The next day, I contacted an agent and listed this house divided in the marriage for sale. I want to leave this city. Taking the love and money Mom gave me, go to a place where no one knows me. Live well. Live as a beam of light, blinding everyone's damn eyes.